friends? My name is Emily and I am 28 years old and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. And today I'm going to go through my entire work history. So every job that I've had from when I first started working when I was 17 until now, over 10 years later. For every job that I go through, I'm going to give either my hourly or salary pay, but for certain years I also have from my W-2s exactly how much money I made that year. And I think that's also interesting to see what I actually made versus what I was salaried or hourly to make that year. All right, my first job that I had from 2013 to 2014 was working part-time at a family friend's office. I was like their office clerk, did a lot of paper filing, a lot of sending out mailers. I did a lot of shredding for some reason. I remember shredding a lot. I guess they were cleaning out their files. But anyway, at that job, I made $7.25 an hour, which is the minimum wage in Georgia. I think it's still the minimum wage in Georgia, and that's kind of horrifying. But that is how much I made. And like I said, I worked there when I was in high school all the way up until I went to college. So I made a little bit of extra money this summer before I went to college because I was working full-time hours there instead of part-time just after school. Then I graduated high school in May of 2014, and I didn't have any positions that were paid until 2016, but I did do a volunteer student teaching position in 2015. And that was just for, I think it was like an academic fraternity I was in, required a certain number of volunteer hours. So I did do that for a little while. I did that for one semester. But aside from that, from leaving my high school job to summer of 2016, I did not work at all. Then in the summer of 2016, I had another family friend who had an opening in their office. They needed someone to work their front desk. So I took that job, and this was full-time hours during the summer, and I was making $8.50 an hour, which was exciting to me as someone who was previously making the bare minimum wage, and that's what I was expecting them to pay me too. But I made $8.50 an hour, so that was great. It was a lot of the same kind of stuff, occasionally answering phones, which was a little bit different for me, but mostly just filing papers, organizing things. I remember them doing like a big clean out of their files because they actually had someone to help with them. I worked there May through June until I had to go back to school, and then I also worked there again in December as soon as my winter break started, all the way through January when I had to go back to school again. So I worked there an extra month because they needed a hand and they hadn't filled my position. In the meantime though, while I was in school that fall semester of 2016, I was trying to apply for a job at my school's tutoring center, but I was about to transfer to a different school after that semester. So they said they couldn't hire me because I wasn't going to be there long enough, but they did have a friend whose kids needed tutoring, and I started tutoring a middle schooler and an elementary schooler in math once a week. And I made $20 an hour doing that. I tutored each kid for 1 hour. I didn't have to do very much to prep for their lessons, so that was nice. That was definitely the best rate that I have made at this point in my life. $20 an hour sounded great to me, especially because they were just paying me in cash and I was a college student. A+. Then in January of 2017, I transferred to Georgia Tech, and previously, I guess I didn't mention this, but for additional context, I was in the very fortunate position of not having to take out any student loans. I didn't have to work through school, so that's why I was pretty much only working when I had breaks from school, or it was some really good opportunity like the tutoring situation. But I was also taking a lot of physics classes, and I just spent a lot of my time studying, and like I said, I was in a fortunate situation where I did not have to balance studying and working. I was able to just focus on studying. So when I transferred to Georgia Tech, it was the same situation. My parents wanted me to focus on studying. I wasn't expected to have a job, so I did not for all of 2017. That was my first full year there. Then moving on to 2018, this is where things get a little weird because in May of 2017, I had started a YouTube channel, mostly out of boredom because being a transfer student in the middle of your third year of school is kind of isolating. It's not really the time when people are trying to make friends the same way that everyone is freshman year, and I needed something to do. And I was also realizing that I didn't really like my major. I was doing mechanical engineering, and I didn't think that it was for me, but I also didn't know what else to do. But I did know that I liked playing The Sims and that I liked video editing, so I started making gaming videos. Flash forward to 2018, I have two different types of income. I have W-2 income for the year, and then I have self-employment income from YouTube and Twitch because I had also started streaming. So my W-2 income was, again, that same nonprofit that I worked at previously. The summer of 2018, I worked there again, and they hired me as like a communications intern. So at this point, I had changed my major. I dropped mechanical engineering and I was doing media and communications. So they hired me as an intern because they wanted to put together a training program for all of the new people who work with the nonprofit. And they have kind of high turnover in a certain position, so they really wanted a good training plan for those kinds of people so that they could just watch training videos when they got hired and they didn't have to go through a one-on-one onboarding process that they were previously doing. So that was the main reason that they brought me on, but I did end up just doing a lot of the old things I used to do for them as kind of their front desk person. And again, I was making $8.50 an hour, so the same as what they were paying me previously, which I was a little bit annoyed about because later I realized that in the time that I was gone, everyone else had gotten a raise from $8.50 an hour to $9 an hour. And when they hired me back, they asked me what I was making previously, and I told them $8.50, and they just paid me the same, knowing that everyone else had gotten a bump to $9 an hour. But that's fine in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't really matter. I just remember it being very annoying to me at the time. And this is also part of why I think that videos like this are so interesting and so important, is because I feel like we should all normalize talking about how much money we make. Because if I had been able to talk to some of those people when I was first getting rehired, I would have known immediately and been able to negotiate instead of finding out like a few weeks before I left. Anyway, my second W-2 income was being an RA. After a year of commuting to campus, because living in Atlanta as a college student is very expensive, all of the student apartments are like $1,000+ a month in rent, and the on-campus housing is not much better. I was living in the suburbs and commuting into the city every day for a year, and that was awful. So I ended up getting a job as an RA so that I could live on campus for free, which is not reflected in the dollar amount, but I think it's important to note because I was getting compensated in free housing. But as an RA, I was also making a $40 bi-weekly stipend, and this basically just covered my gas money. I think that's all I remember using it for. And again, I'm in the fortunate position of my parents cover all of my other basic expenses, like groceries, dining out, all of that, I was getting an allowance for, so this was able to just cover like extra gas money or random things that I wanted to do. And for my W-2 income for the year of 2018, I made $3,567. So looking at that now, I think that is really not a lot, but at the time it felt very important to me. My $40 bi-weekly stipend really got me through. And moving on to the self-employment income, this was anything I got from AdSense on YouTube, any revenue I got from streaming on Twitch. This was $708, which I think in practice felt more important to me because I was making that while I was in school, whereas the other money that I made during my summer job, I don't remember honestly if I was like saving it with the intent of using it throughout the semester or if I was just kind of spending it. I don't remember what I was doing at that time in my life when it came to, I know I wasn't budgeting, but I don't remember if I had some sort of like auto transfer to savings set up. I might have, but I can almost guarantee that I was constantly like dipping into it and transferring money from savings. So no real system there. Moving on to 2019, again, we have my W-2 work and my self-employment work. And I'm still an RA, so I'm still getting my $40 bi-weekly stipend through July of 2019, plus my free housing. And then the last semester of 2019 was my last semester of school, so I wasn't able to be an RA for just one semester, so I ended up moving off campus. And I think a lot of the money that I made over the last couple years, I actually did save, because I think the only reason I felt comfortable signing my lease was because I had this savings in place. My last semester of school in 2019 was also the first time that I was responsible for any of my living expenses. Like I said, my parents always gave me money for groceries and eating out, but that was really it. And when I told them I was gonna move off campus instead of moving back home for my last semester, they said I had to pay my own rent, which was very reasonable. They had already given me so much in paying for school, paying for all my basic needs, that made total sense to me, and I was willing to take that on. because in May of 2019, I also got a job. I had a friend who had graduated a year previously and she just got a new job at was it a nonprofit? I guess it was a nonprofit. Was it a nonprofit? I don't even know. It was a company that worked for nonprofits or worked with nonprofits. And I think it was a for-profit company. The lines are really blurry there. And I'm not even gonna get into that because it's a mess. It's a company that doesn't exist anymore. But anyway, I had a friend who had just started there in the marketing team, and she knew they were hiring, and she knew that I was kind of looking for a job now that I was gonna have to start paying rent. And I was trying to figure all of that out. Everything happened very quickly. It was like my friend told me about this job, and then all of a sudden I had another friend who was telling me about a townhouse that her and a friend were trying to rent, and they needed a third roommate. And it all just worked out perfectly to where, and this is not something I would recommend, but my income from my job just barely covered my rent. And that was kind of all I needed at the time because my parents were gonna pay for all my other basic needs. I just needed to be able to pay for my rent. So I made the very ill-informed decision to sign that lease and make all of that happen. Long story short, the original hourly rate that this company was paying me, and I was working, I think I was contracted for like 30 hours a week, and they were gonna pay me $15 an hour, which again, sounded pretty good to me, not as good as my tutoring gig, but the best that I've gotten from any kind of part-time work so far. So that was exciting. And it covered what I needed it to, so that was fine. I started in May part-time, and then once I graduated in December, I started working full-time, and my starting salary was $42,000 a year. So all of my W-2 work in 2019, which included like 1 week of my full-time salary, and mostly just my contractor work with them, and then my RA weekly stipend or bi-weekly stipend for most of the year. That put me at $13,993 for 2019, which was a huge increase from 2018. I made $10,000 more that year, more or less. So that was crazy. And then my self-employment income also went up from YouTube and streaming on Twitch. I made $1,242. All my self-employment stuff, it wasn't like a huge amount of money, but it did make a difference to me as a college student. And honestly, I think I probably put most of that money back in to all of the online stuff I was doing. Like I upgraded my computer at one point. I was constantly like buying little things for streams. Yeah, a lot of that money just kind of went back into my hobbies, but it allowed me to keep doing them, and that was pretty cool. Okay, on to 2020, everyone's favorite year. I don't have my W-2 like total income for the year because I couldn't find it anywhere. It's just, it doesn't exist in any of the places where I do my taxes or like keep my tax documents. So that was weird, but also kind of makes sense because what a weird time. I graduated from Georgia Tech with my degree in media and communication December of 2019, and then 2020, I was working full-time at that company. And by this point, I had actually gotten an increase to $43,200 a year. And I don't remember exactly when that kicked in, but I think it was pretty shortly after I got hired. So hired full-time, so that was nice. And I worked there until July when I got laid off. So that was really fun. What a great time to be laid off. Love to see it. And then my unemployment that I made from July through October was about $800 a week from what I remember, which was not too shabby. I was really happy with that. And then I started working part-time in October, and I was working online as an instructor teaching kids about video editing, and I was making $23 an hour, which was good. But what I didn't realize at the time was that as soon as that job started, my unemployment ended. I don't know why I thought this, but in my head, until I was employed full-time again, I would continue receiving my benefits. But as soon as that payroll went through and I was on their W-2, whatever, my unemployment benefits got cut off, which makes sense in hindsight. But at the time, I really didn't expect that to happen. So that was a huge loss because now I'm making significantly less money. I'm not working full-time teaching kids. I'm working a few hours every weeknight teaching a couple kids after school. I was maybe doing like 5 or so lessons a week. So if you think about it, like once a weeknight, maybe a little bit more than that when I first started and I was being more aggressive about it. But yeah, it was not like a huge source of income, and it was really difficult to lose the benefits that I had. And I so wish that I could see my total income for this year because I'd be very interested, but I just don't have the numbers. Then shortly after that, I also started teaching online, but I was teaching English to kids in China. And that I was making $14 an hour basically. It was $7 a class, and they were 30-minute classes. So that worked out to be $14 an hour. That was pretty sad to me. At this point, I am not doing well. I have moved back in with my parents fully. Luckily, I didn't have any major expenses, and the one thing that I was able to maintain and that I was really proud of myself for was always being able to just buy my own groceries. If I have no other expenses and they're covering everything else, at the very least I can buy my own groceries, and I was able to do that. So that made me feel okay, but not great. And throughout this time, I was also still making some income from Twitch and YouTube, but not nearly as much. Once I started working full-time, I dropped off a lot of that stuff because I was just so burned out, and I didn't realize how much energy it was going to take to work a full-time job and maintain all of this other stuff. So I was doing a really bad job of balancing it, and then once I got laid off, I think I was kind of embarrassed, and it also felt like hard to come back after abandoning my channels a little bit for several months. So that was just a rough time, but I did still make some income from those platforms. Then moving on to 2021, that year I have, again, some W-2 income, some self-employment income, and now I've kind of grouped the categories a little bit differently. So my W-2 income in October of 2021, we are now like a little over a year post layoff. I'm finally working full-time again. My parents decided to sell the house that we were living in and downsize, and they were moving to Florida, and I live in Georgia, and everyone I know is in Georgia, and I did not really like the idea of moving to Florida with them into their retirement community downsizing lifestyle. So I knew that I needed to just get a job and I needed to move out. So again, I end up getting a job as kind of like a front desk person, working at an accounting firm. But I was their office and media manager, which was kind of nice. They hired me to redo their website. So this was a completely just like Indeed job search portal job. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't have any recommendations. This was not a family friend. This was very much I need a job. I'm applying to everything online that seems like something I can do, and this is the one that I heard back from that seemed the most stable. So I started there making $40,000 a year, which I was really disappointed in myself in because I hated the idea of making more money fresh out of college than I did at my next job. That was really upsetting, and it was a hit to my ego. But total for the time that I worked there, I ended up making $15,944.52. Anyway, that was my entire W-2 income for the year of 2021, and that was working there from October. Was it October? Or I think I started in September, but I did move back into Atlanta in October. So I started there in September, and then I worked there through December, and that was how much money I made, about $16,000, which was kind of crazy because just in working those last few months of the year, I made more money than I made in all of 2019. So I guess that has to count for something. I would really love to see the comparison from 2020 to 2021 because I feel like I definitely made more money in 2020. Anyway, moving on to the self-employment for 2021. I was still teaching English online for a little bit of that time. I was still teaching video editing classes for a little bit of that time. And I was also still doing a little bit of Twitch and YouTube. YouTube, I think, was mostly passive income at this point, like fully passive income, because I wasn't posting anything new. I think I did post a few new videos, but for the most part, it was just old ad revenue from old videos. And then Twitch, more or less the same thing. I still had some people subscribe to me, so every few months I would get a check just from the $5 a month or whatever that I would get from each person who was subscribed. For self-employment for 2021, I made $2,093, which was actually my best self-employment year yet. And I think that's because that also includes those two kind of like freelance jobs, which technically the one teaching kids video editing was a W-2 position, but I just included it in self-employment to separate it out from my actual full-time job that I ended up with at the end of 2021. On to 2022, we are almost caught up to real time. So for 2022, I actually started at the company that I currently work and I started as a software consultant, and I had my first day January 18th of 2022. So that was the only income that I made for the entire year of 2022 was this salary, and I was salaried for $75,000 a year for that entire year. And I ended up making $66,575, which is a really crazy number when you look at the amount of money that I had made previously. But I think that just goes to show you how big of a difference it makes once you're employed full-time for an entire year versus when you're employed full-time for part of a year or laid off or doing a bunch of part-time things. It really makes a big difference. And I think that I finally started to feel stable once I got my current job, or once I started working at the company that I work for now. There are definitely downsides to it because I think that it's a lot easier to burn out when you're working full-time and you have less control over your schedule. There's other things to consider, but just the fact that all of my health insurance is paid for with my company. They have a 401k match. There's just a lot of benefits where even though I think that my life is more suited to working part-time and designing my own schedule, the things that I want to do in life are not suited to that type of income. I just am like still reflecting on how crazy big of a jump that is. And it really did change my life. So moving on to 2023. Oh, and for more context on how I got that specific job, my partner had just started working there in October. So a month after I got my accounting firm office manager job, my partner started working at the software company. He had previously been a software consultant, and he also was looking for a full-time job. He started there. And then he was telling me, based on the way that they do their software consulting position, he felt like it was something that I could do too, even though I didn't have any kind of like CS degree. I didn't have any kind of like, I guess like coding experience. Like you didn't really need that for this job. And even though I didn't have any consulting experience, what they were calling a consultant isn't what you think of when you think of like Big Four management consulting. So he said he thought I could do it. He said it would be a big salary jump for me, and he encouraged me to apply, and I did, and I got it. So that's how I found out about that job. And moving on to 2023, last year, I again started the year as a software consultant, same company, and I got a title change to project coordinator. They split up our software consultant position into kind of like a customer success manager, project coordinator, which is under like project management, and then a like technical person, someone who's more like actively maintaining the software. And I ended up moving to the project coordinator team. And in April of that year, I got a small raise. I got an increase to about $78,000 a year. And I also got my bonus from the previous year paid out in March. So whenever our company hits our metrics, we get an additional 10% plus of our salary, depending on if we hit our metrics or exceed them or whatever, we get a bonus. So I got paid out my bonus from the previous year, plus I got a slight increase in April. And for 2023, I ended up making $80,466 for that year. And for 2024, obviously I don't have my final numbers, but I can say that in April of this year, I did get a promotion, which came with another raise. And now I'm a senior project coordinator, and I make $84,240 a year. And my bonus that was paid out in March of this year from the previous year was $8,078. So we are looking at another year where it's hopefully just going to go up again, which is nice. I'm not expecting any crazy changes next year, only because I did get a promotion this year. So next year is probably going to be pretty comparable to this year, but I hope that this was interesting. I hope that it was informative. I think it's also just nice to share these kinds of things because I think we all put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and especially if you're about to graduate college or you're looking to move industries or whatever, it's hard to know what a reasonable salary expectation is. And when you're graduating, there's just a lot of pressure to do something with your degree. And I'm not really doing anything with my degree. I work in project management now. I studied physics for 3 years, I studied mechanical engineering for a year, and then I studied media and communication and ultimately got my degree in that. I thought that I was going to work in film, I thought that I was going to be a video editor, that's what I wanted to do, and here I am working in software project management. So I think there are worse things I could be doing. I am pretty happy and comfortable with my current salary. So all of this to say, don't be too hard on yourself. Things can change very quickly. I think in my timeline, things changed for the better and for the worse very quickly, quite a few times. So I don't know, I feel like my big takeaway looking back at all of this is, number one, it's cool to see the growth, but also number two, everything is temporary and circumstances can change so quickly. I hope this was interesting. I hope it was entertaining at least. Let me know if you have any thoughts on my own journey, if this made you think of any different times in your life where you had like something crazy happen, whether it was a layoff, whether it was a huge promotion, whether it was crazy offer for a salary you weren't thinking you would achieve for years. I know that starting to work full-time was a huge wake-up call to me because being the kid who was good at math and science, I always thought that I would just become an engineer and immediately make six figures, and that's just not reality. So I think that it's good to be transparent about these kinds of things and kind of the timeline that it takes to achieve certain things in life. On paper, it can seem like the path is very straightforward, and in reality, it's not. So I hope you enjoyed, I hope you're having a good day, and I will talk to you next time.